All right, we're on to lesson 17 here. Do we have our camera on there, Sawyer?
Yep.
Okay, good. We're going to talk about generalization and generalization training. This is a really, really important part of human behavior. And in general, no pun intended. In general, when we talk about generalization, it means that you're going to be able to, or we hope that you're able to, perform a behavior in many different situations, even though you haven't been taught to perform that behavior in each of those different situations. This is a really, really adaptive behavior for human beings and other organisms. Think about it, if you had to be taught to put on every different pair of pants that you've ever worn. Because you've got, let's just talk about blue jeans. You've got blue jeans with zippers, right? And then you've got, what are they? The 501s with buttons, the Levi's. And then you have those weird sweatpant things.
Jeans.
Any other kind of blue jean pant-like things that you have to possibly wear? If you wear so-called dress pants, suit pants for men, maybe women too, it's got the little tab and the inside button, and then it's got the clip, and then it's got another button and a zipper. Generalization allows a person to perform the same response in different situations. Otherwise, we have to teach that skill in every situation where the skill is required. That would be a chore, wouldn't it? Okay? So this is an amazing process that all organisms are capable of, to a certain extent. And what the science of behavior has told us is that there's ways in which we can promote generalization, make it more likely that an organism can respond appropriately in different situations where they need to. Okay? So, generalization. We've got, like always, technical terms. We've got a number of new ones here. Generalization is when you behave the same way in the presence of a stimulus that is similar to the training stimulus, the discriminative stimulus, the SD. So you're behaving the same way in the presence of a new stimulus, a new situation that is similar to the training situation, the SD situation. When we observe that, it's called generalization. Generalization is the flip side of discrimination. If we had a coin, a quarter, on one side would be generalization, on the other side of that coin would be discrimination. Discrimination is behaving differently in the presence of different stimuli. Generalization is behaving the same way in the presence of different stimuli. Okay? Here's an example. Simple one. You say hello, that's the behavior. You, that's who we're analyzing. You say hello to only people you have met before. Right? So you're going to make a discrimination. Met, not met this person. If I've met this person before, I'll say hello. If I have never met this person before, what do? You don't respond. Okay? Discrimination requires 2 stimuli, 1 response. Generalization, we're going to flip that coin. On the other side of the coin is generalization. You're going to respond the same way in different situations. So now you're going to say hello to who? Everybody you see. Generalization. Generalization training is an instructional or teaching procedure where the behavior, our desired behavior, is reinforced in different situations until that behavior begins to occur in these different situations. We're going to reinforce the desired behavior in different situations until that behavior occurs in those different situations. Generalization training. Now, if you recall when you were a youngster, or if you have your own children, your parents, we hope, were teaching you some courtesy skills. Saying please and thank you, right? So your parents, if they were using generalization training, would prompt you to say please, reinforce your behavior of saying please in many different situations until you were saying please in all those situations. And then they did the same thing for thank you. They'd prompt you to say thank you when you receive something. They'd reinforce that behavior of saying thank you in this situation and the next one. Yes, question?
So the difference between like this and shaping would be the SD?
We've got an SD. That's exactly right. That's a good question.
Okay.
In discrimination training, we've got 1 response, 2 stimuli. In shaping, there are no discriminative stimuli. And we take a small piece of behavior and differentially reinforce that to get it to grow, so to speak. But yeah, that's a good question. Okay? So you have most likely undergone generalization training by your parents in this please and thank you example. Okay? So it's a process. A stimulus class. This is an important concept too, a stimulus class. It is a set of stimuli which share, all of the stimuli share some common physical property or feature. A stimulus class, a set of stimuli that share some common stimulus feature or property, like size, color, position. Have you ever known anybody, I'm going to make this male specific, but it could be female specific too, okay? Have you ever known anybody who, in terms of a male, only dated women with blonde hair? So, if we look at this as a stimulus class, all the women within that stimulus class share a common feature, don't they? Blonde hair. There may be some others that we could identify too, but on the face of it, it's blonde hair. A stimulus class. Here's some examples, as I mentioned before. Size, shape, color, position, physical structure. Here's an interesting one. Sawyer works as a registered behavioral technician. He and I talk about this all the time. He has some really interesting cases. that he works with, does some important and good stuff. One of the types of individuals that he works with are kids with autism spectrum disorder. Individuals with autism spectrum disorder tend to have a very restricted, a very small, think of a stimulus class as a circle, a very small circle of food textures that they will eat. So the texture of the food has got to be a particular construction, a particular feeling on the tongue for that individual to eat it. If they come in contact with a food that's outside that stimulus class, doesn't have those physical properties, they won't eat it. Food refusal. Okay? So the concept of stimulus class becomes really important in our understanding and helping a whole variety of people. Generalization training, going back to our coin, okay? Generalization training broadens stimulus control. It broadens stimulus control, which means that now we have many different situations that will regulate the occurrence of behavior. Those stimuli in those situations will set the occasion for the behavior, and the behavior will occur as a function of generalization training. We flip our coin, go back to discrimination. That's narrow stimulus control. That's very narrow stimulus control. Let's go back to our example of greeting people. You only greet people whom you've met. That's a very narrow range of people, right? When you walk down the hallway here between classes, how many of the people that you observe have you actually met? Very few among all those people out there. So we've got, with discrimination training, very, very narrow stimulus control. With generalization training, we have broad stimulus control. There are a number of strategies for producing generalization. We're only going to talk about one or two here. We talk about many of them in other classes because those are the advanced classes. But just to give you a taste of how it's done, the typical approach by many people, not so much behavior analysts because we know how to do it better, but the typical approach is to teach a person a skill in one setting and hope that that skill, that behavior, is performed in another setting. Here's a great example. Okay? We're talking about generalization today, aren't we? I've given you a bunch of examples, haven't I? And I'm teaching you to discriminate discrimination versus generalization. And I'm hoping that in the real world, you will be able to observe an example of generalization and discrimination. This is a lot of what education is about. Providing you information and hoping that your performance will generalize to some other situation. It doesn't work very well. Here's another example. So we're doing this in class, right? I'm teaching you this, I'm lecturing, I'm educating you, and I'm hoping that on the quiz, in the very near future, where you will have examples, questions that you've not seen before, but are very similar to what we're talking about here, very similar to the examples that I've given you. I'm hoping that you will do what? Pardon?
Be able to know the answer.
Answer it correctly. That would be generalization. Okay? Here's one thing you hopefully have, crossing my fingers, hopefully have come across this repeatedly in your courses. Why do faculty give you so many examples of a principle, a concept? Is it just to torture you?
No.
To produce generalization. When you get another example of that, within that stimulus class, you can respond correctly. That's why many examples, that's why in the Miller book, it's example after example after example to produce generalized mastery, generalization. Similar stimuli method. This is where you're teaching a skill, you're teaching a behavior, and you want this person to perform this skill, to perform this behavior in another situation. So you identify the stimuli in that criterion situation, and you bring them into the teaching situation. So the teaching situation has common stimuli. The stimuli that are common are those in the natural environment, in the criterion environment, and in the teaching situation. When you do that, it will produce more generalization. Okay? So we've got an example here. We're going to teach a person relaxation skills in an office setting. But that's not where they need to relax. They need to relax in situations where they experience stress, tension, anxiety, nervousness. Right? Not in the office. So if we're going to use common stimuli, we want to identify those stimuli in the natural environment that evoke tension, anxiety, or elicit anxiety, and try to present them in the office setting where we're teaching this person the relaxation skills. Okay? That would be common stimuli. And we got drug refusal skills here too. This is a real world one. You know, just down the road, that way, Clinton, there's a residential drug treatment place. For 30 days, someone goes to, they call it rehab, but it's drug treatment. They go to rehab. For 30 days, they're confined to an environment totally unlike the natural environment to which they have to go back to. Now, given what you've learned so far, what is the likelihood that any skills that they learn down there will generalize to the real world?
It's very slim. I work there.
It's very slim. It's very slim, not because you work there, but it's just very slim.
No, and that, yeah, I work there, so as soon as you said it, I knew what you were talking
Yeah,
about.
it's very slim because 30 days in a drug treatment rehab center, is that like Independence, Missouri, where you came from?
No.
Absolutely not. There's no stimuli that are similar. So if we were to go back, what is that drug treatment center down the road doing? They're doing train and hope.
Yep.
They're not programming common stimuli into their drug rehab treatment program. If you do that, you're going to get more success. You're going to have people who are going to be able to refuse taking drugs, or they are going to do something other than engage in drug-taking behavior. Now, this example is really, really important. Principles of behavior are relevant to, guess what? Counseling, drug treatment, clinical psychology. It's not just isolated to what we see on the video clips. The video clips are just easy to access, yes.
The example you gave about like the drug center, so would that be like discriminated stimuli, like they're present in the center, that's one stimulus, and then going back to wherever they came from is another stimulus?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's perfect example of discrimination. Okay. Generalized extinction. We've talked about extinction before, where we stop the presentation of the reinforcer is going to cause the behavior to decrease in frequency and eventually cease to occur. Generalized extinction. We apply the extinction contingency in multiple situations where we want that behavior to decrease in frequency. And we will get generalized decrease in responding. Generalized extinction. Concept formation. This is cognition. Concept formation. Cognition. Special type of discrimination. This is a special type of discrimination. An organism discriminates members that are not part of the stimulus class, and the organism discriminates members that are part of the stimulus class. The concept. A concept is simply a stimulus class, a set of stimuli that share a common feature. So concept formation, you're saying, yes, that's a member, no, that ain't a member of this stimulus class. Complex discrimination. So we're going to look at some examples here. Herrnstein and Loveland, this is such a cool example of a pigeon, a bunch of pigeons actually. 1966, before electricity. Herrnstein and Loveland taught pigeons to discriminate the concept people versus not people. So, first question is, are you a people? You are a member of the class people, right? Singular person, plural people, or persons, I guess. But you're a people, okay? So we got a pigeon who's being taught to discriminate, yeah, that's a person, singular, people, those are people, and this, no, those are not people. Just consider that. A little bird who sits on the edge of a building and you know what they do. And now this bird can discriminate people from not people through discrimination training. This was an amazing finding that pigeons can be taught to do this. And we have procedures that can do that. So how did they do it? They present a discriminative stimulus, a set of them, various pictures of people. When the pigeon pecked the disc, that behavior was reinforced in the presence of the SD. Various pictures of people. Then they present the S delta, various pictures of not people. If the pigeon pecked the disc, that behavior was on extinction. And eventually, the pigeon only pecked the disc in the presence of the SD. Various pictures of people. Notice that I said various, meaning more than one picture of a people. Okay? There it is. I walked you through it. This is the contingency diagram. The reinforcer is grain. Peck the disc in the presence of the SD. A little bit of grain was then presented. And as long as that various pictures of people was present and the key pecking occurred, the bird would get grain on some type of schedule of reinforcement, most likely a variable ratio, variable interval. Okay? Classic stuff. Any questions at this point? Ready to rock and roll? Pardon?
Can you go back?
Yeah, sure. Question?
So if the tried and hope method is not successful.
I can't quite hear you.
If the tried and hope method is not as successful, why is it used so much?
Because most people are not trained how to, it's called program for generalization. Okay, counselors, if you're a counseling psychologist, PhD, you have no idea what generalization is. You've not been taught. Okay, because you go into that level of training, you get a lot of stuff about counseling, but you don't get any courses on changing behavior. And that's what we're talking about. But isn't that what counseling is all about? Getting people to change their behavior, to behave differently in different contexts? And unless you know how these principles of behavior work, you're hoping that whatever you do is gonna work. And we know that it doesn't work. Not so much counseling per se, but you have to have multiple examples of how you want that person to behave and in what context. And they have to be taught how to do that. So, but that's a good question.
And you can't like hold their hand the whole time either.
You can't, because people come into your office, and if you're lucky, you'll have a 45-minute session with them. And you gotta, as these two gentlemen are learning, you gotta get a lot done in 45 minutes, don't you?
Yeah.
They're doing a field experience in behavioral counseling. That's where they want to go professionally. A lot goes on, but you always have to keep multiple things in the forefront. Think behavior. Think small steps. Think reinforcement. And think generalization. Always to be successful. Here's another one. This is such a cool study. I had one of my favorites. Okay, this is, we're going to talk about Watanabe in a moment here. We got Watanabe, 1996, trained pigeons, once again, trained pigeons to discriminate two stimulus classes of artwork. You know, and art is, as they say, artsy-fartsy. Art, different styles of art, different stimulus classes of art. We've got Pablo Picasso, famous artist, painting in the style of abstract art, which is a stimulus class. And in the subset of abstract art is another stimulus class called Cubism. And we've got on display here examples, various examples of Cubist, not Cuba, but Cubist art. Okay? And I was never hip to Pablo Picasso. It just doesn't do anything for me. But that's an example. Okay? Now we're going to go to another famous artist. I like this guy. Oscar Claude Monet, Impressionism. Here's a quote, okay? Expressing one's perception of nature. It's what you observe and how you interpret what you're seeing, okay? And that looks kind of like real, doesn't it? But it's not a member of the stimulus class of art called realism. This is a different stimulus class, impressionism. So you can discriminate these different types of art based on a stimulus class within which they fall. This one is in that stimulus class, this one is not in that stimulus class, or that concept. Okay? So now, Watanabe, I said 95, 96 is 95. Watanabe trained pigeons to discriminate these two stimulus classes of artwork. Cubism by Pablo Picasso, Impressionism by Monet, using discrimination training. So that when we have various paintings by Pablo Picasso displayed as the SD and the bird pecked the disc, that behavior would be reinforced. When various paintings by Monet were presented and the bird pecked the disc, that behavior would be on extinction. So now the bird was reliably pecking the disc only in the presence of the various pictures by Picasso, paintings by Picasso. Concept formation. Let's take it a step further. Generalization. The definition of generalization is behaving the same way in a situation that's similar to the training situation. Right? Here's our training situation. What would you predict would occur if we presented a novel, meaning never observed before, a novel painting by Picasso? What would you predict would occur if we presented a novel, never seen before by the pigeon, painting by Picasso? I can't quite hear you.
I said they'd probably recognize it.
What? Well, you're close, but it wouldn't be recognized. The bird would do what? The bird would peck the disc in the presence of this novel painting by Picasso. Why?
He would assume.
No, wouldn't be assuming anything. Generalization. Is that new painting by Picasso a member of the stimulus class Cubist art? Absolutely. It's discriminating. That new example is within the stimulus class of Cubist art, paintings by Picasso. We've got generalization. Now, what would happen? What would you predict would occur if we present a novel Monet painting to our little pigeon? Wake me up when you have the answer.
Well, he knew Monet painting.
Don't say new. Just tell me what he's doing.
He's not going to peck the disc.
Pardon?
He's not going to peck the disc.
We don't have pecking occurring in the presence of the new Monet. Why? I can't hear you.
Generalization.
No? Well, yeah, it is. It is generalization, and it's something else too, right? It's discrimination and generalization, isn't it? It's generalization because the bird is behaving the same way in the presence of the novel Picasso. It's saying, yes, this is not a member of the Cubist art class, but it is a member of the Monet class of stimuli. And when the Monet class of stimuli are present, I'm just going to smoke cigarettes and drink beer, as much as pigeons can do. They're not going to peck the disc. They're discriminating members in the class, and they're discriminating members outside of the class. We have both ways, generalization and discrimination. By pigeons and artwork. You can get highly paid to make these discriminations if you're a human being. You're an art critic. Okay. All righty. FYI, this is a quick FYI. Next Monday at, I think it's 3:30, there is a meeting that you all might want to attend. It's about jobs and careers. So if you're interested in doing something other than working at Walmart, you might want to attend. It's sponsored by Psi Chi, Psych Club, and the Behavior Analysis Club. fully inclusive. All right.